to today's talk session. My name is Deidre Moss, and I am the host of Can We Talk? I am an educator, a motivator, and a talk connoisseur. My guest today is PhD candidate, Miss Jaditra Ingram. I got your name right?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So, Mrs. Ingram, can we talk about millennials, and mental health? But
Well,
go ahead.
go ahead. Thank you for having me today. I think this is a very interesting topic in terms of what we're seeing in the last 2 years about trends, about who's seeking therapy, why are they coming to therapy, and also the conversations that people are having around therapy. So I'm happy that we have this kind of opportunity just to have a conversation about it and talk about what's going on around us.
Thank you, and I completely agree. And so we'll see why this conversation is so important as we get into our talk. But before we get into our session, I want to give you, Ms. Ingram, an opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you would have sent a bio, but I want to give you the floor. Tell us about yourself. Therefore, I will pass the virtual mic to you.
Okay, that's a lot of pressure. So what would I like to say about myself? I am a therapist. My area of, I would say, preference, or the people that I work with mostly, are those people in recovery, but I also specialize in adolescents and working together with their families to help them with mental health issues. I've been practicing for about 6-7 years locally. Before that, I completed my master's at London Metropolitan University, and I also went to St. Mary's University as an undergraduate, go SMU. I think my biggest desire is really to help people move themselves forward, whatever the challenges are that they're facing, just being able to help them make some changes and live their best life.
Awesome. You did a great job introducing yourself. And so as we get into the talk, as we get started, I want to briefly talk about this cohort of persons. Can We Talk has devoted a lot of our talk sessions to the topic of mental health because we understand that this is a sensitive topic and there is a lot of stigma that is attached to the topic of mental health. In some of our communities, we rarely have a discussion about mental health, if we have any at all. Therefore, it is our goal, one of our goals, to reduce the stigma that is attached to mental health issues and talking about mental health. So today, our focus, our discussion will be on millennials and their mental health. So first of all, let us get an understanding of this group of persons who are millennials. So they are also known as Generation Y, sorry. There are some variations between where the age group falls, but some definitions state that millennials were born between the early 80s and early 90s. I also saw another definition that said millennials were born between 1982 and 2000. So there are some variations, but typically most definitions would say that a millennial was born between 1981 and 1996. So these persons would roughly be between the ages of 25 to 40 years old right now. And according to Kasaza.com, within this age group or cohort of persons, there is another divide. There's a younger generation. So there's Generation Y, known as Y1. That's the younger cohort. And then there's an older group, Y2. There are some unique characteristics within this group. And according to balancecareers.com, millennials are the fastest growing segment in the workplace. They are tech savvy because they grew up with technology. They stay plugged in and communicate via email, text, and through social media platforms. They are achievement oriented, prone to job hopping, crave attention, and this generation also knows what they want and pursue it. And the list goes on and on about the different characteristics that are specific to this group. But I wanted to dive a little into the definitions and characteristics of this group as the background for our talk. So with that being said, we can get into our talk session. Stigma. Ms. Ingram, do you find that millennials are more comfortable talking about their mental health?
I think you've made a couple of really good points. First, the millennials are this generation that has grown up with a lot of technology. They have transitioned us from just how we lived on a regular day and how we accessed information into having information readily available to them and being able to access it with the click of a finger. And that's changed, one, what they're talking about, two, how they're talking about it, and the way that they have come to look at the world. So one of the things I think is very important is that when it comes to mental health, there is no real difference in between how they see the world. They have more information about what mental illness is versus what mental health is. And they're also open and engaged to discussion. If you look on the internet, there are a lot of millennials talking about my therapist says, or there are a lot of pages devoted to mental health and mental well-being. So somehow this generation has helped us to transition away from just talking about mental illness and a lot of the stereotypes that go along with it to really talking about mental health and wellness and well-being. So that's one of the great places to start having this discussion. They inadvertently created this change by just having conversations and discussing the importance of mental health versus mental illness.
Thank you. Those are some awesome points. Because as I reviewed different articles and research, I found that millennials within this age group, there's less stigma that is attached to the topic of mental health because they're more comfortable about talking about mental health and the issues that are associated with it. This group of persons grew up with technology, so they share aspects of their lives online. They communicate online, they share their feelings online. I know, for example, for me, sometimes upon scrolling online, I may see someone with a long paragraph of, let me tell you what happened to me today. And I'm like, oh no, I'm not reading this long paragraph. But the fact is that people are able to vent, they're able to express how they feel on, even though it's on an online platform, they're able to get whatever feelings they have out there. And so I think growing up with technology, this generation, they have more of an opportunity to express their feelings and vent, and how people give their input and say, oh, this is how I feel. This is, so it's a very interesting thing to have to within this cohort of persons. So moving on to our next point, what does the research say about millennials and their mental health? And so let me bring attention to an article that was prepared by Business Insider on October 10, 2020. So that would be on the tail end of last year. As you know, we're in the new year, 2021. But this research, like I said, it was done on the tail end. And so according to this article that is titled Millennials Suffer from Burnout, Depression, and Loneliness, millennials tend to have higher rates of depression than other generations, and the COVID-19 crisis has kind of exaggerated the issue. And so the article also suggests that millennials don't always have someone to share their mental burdens with. They're less likely to have social support than other generations, and because they're marrying late, and they are less connected to political and religious communities. However, the upside of it is that millennials are more likely to go to therapy than previous generations, and in the process, they help to destigmatize the stigma that is attached to mental health issues. So, Ms. Ingram, what are your thoughts on that?
So that makes sense. So we talk about millennials having access to a lot more information, but we also have to talk about how that has changed the way they are perceived in the world and they also perceive the world. So with more information and more access to things, they get different jobs. So jobs their parents wouldn't have necessarily gotten when they were younger. They're a lot more educated. They have a lot more exposure, a lot more experiences. And so all of these things lead to a lot more stress, or stress manifesting itself in a very different way from the generation before them. And so we see these new work routines, we see more being required of them. We see the family system looking a little bit different. We see who they're connected to looking a little bit different because they're scrolling social media, but not actually talking to other people. So all of these factors kind of push them in the direction to say, well, maybe I need to figure out some things and I can't do it on my own, or I can't do it in these social networks that I'm involved in. So I might need some professional help. So one, we see these changes to this generation. Even the World Health Organization last year talked about mental illness rising in every country around the world. And they talked about depression becoming so common that it was debilitating in the millennial generation. And so we've kind of talked about the reasons for that in terms of expectations, the exposure, the information and access. But we also have to think about how we live these days is just very different from that of our parents before. And so when we talk about stigma, we've kind of moved away from the whole, shh, or don't talk about cousin Susan and what she was dealing with, or no, don't speak to him, or don't go by their house because they have these things going on. And we now see so many things being photographed or taped or talked about. The news reports so differently. So we have all these things saying that this thing that was secret or hidden in the corner is no more. So it's hard for the stigma to kind of continue in the way it once did, because it's now having light shed on it and it's being exposed in so many different ways. And then millennials are now recognizing that, hey, this was something that was taboo. This was something that we didn't talk about, but I want to talk about it because it's happening to me. And here we have this kind of selfishness that you mentioned, or this attention seeking. So when something's happening to me, I want to share it. I want to know what's going on with me, and I want to know, how do I make myself better? So all of that has led to this reduction in hiding it, this reduction in not talking about it, or talking about it in whispers to say, hey, something's going on with me and I want to know what it is and how do I get help for it. So that's just one of the ways stigmas was present and how it's being addressed as we move forward.
Great points. Those are awesome points. Um, and just to talk just a little bit about what kind of contributes to the level of depression among this group of persons. I think there is some pressure within this age group. Here you have ages 25 to 40 or 24 to 39. You would have some type of pressure, whether it is a pressure to have a home, or pressure to be financially secure, or pressure to find a partner or find a spouse, or pressure to have a child. You may have societal pressures that may be impacting this age group. So why is it important to seek therapy or to seek help with just minor issue? You may just think that you may be depressed, but why is it so important to seek help for whatever mental issue that you may be having?
So one point I want to mention first, there was a 2019 poll by the American Psychological Association. And what they found was that 62% of people ages 20 to 37 in that millennial group feel comfortable discussing their mental health at work. One of the reasons for that was that they spend a lot of time at work. That was their primary social group. They spent a lot of time wanting to achieve there. They felt a lot of pressure there because they want to move up to the next rung. A lot of their relationships were at work. And when I read that, I thought about how we have kind of changed as a society and moved away from everything happening in the family to it now happening at work. And those pressures then being more so to achieve and accomplish. And the big word is succeed. And how do we measure that success? By our work. Our jobs have become what we do. We spend more than 50 hours a week just trying to be successful and being the best that we can. So it stands to reason that a lot of these pressures that you talk about have now translated to the workplace, and that being the epicenter of where stress is happening and where we see a lot of the mental issues now coming out of. And because of that, people have now set up organizations or set up their own way of saying, hey, I need help. And if I'm going to spend this amount of hours at work working for this company, I want this to be the place where I get help. So I made a couple of points just in terms of what we can do to aid the change as we move forward. The first one really is challenging that stigma talk. And like you mentioned earlier, millennials are really great at posting things and sharing things and telling everybody about what's going on them. And that can really help in like changing the way we discuss mental health, not just in the country, but globally. Like we're moving away from the whispers and people being hidden away and really seeking help in communities and making it the norm to seek help or seek treatment for whatever is bothering them or hindering them from progressing. And I know as we move forward, people often say, but sometimes I don't know how to kind of get help or where to get help. That's the other way. When we're having these conversations, we got to know what resources are out there. We got to know who can help us, where can I find them, how can I access these things so that I can ensure that I am working to my full capability, and also getting an opportunity to express myself in the way that I need. So you got to challenge that stigma talk. You got to figure out ways to access the services or what's available to you. And then you got to embrace what I like to call the integrated whole person approach. So we would spend tons of time, talking about our physical health. Oh, we got to go to the gym. We got to eat right. We got to eat one of my favorites, like tofu and all of these great plant-based products to make our skin look good and to just be looking pristine most days of our lives. But if we don't talk about our mental health or have this realistic approach to, I want to be the whole person and I want to be the best version as a whole person, that's very difficult. What we fail to remember is that when we're stressed out, no amount of drinking water, no amount of eating plant-based foods is going to help us when we can't get our emotions or our mental health under control, or if we can't manage it. So my real goal is to get people to look at themselves holistically. How do I address all of my needs, whether it be physical, emotional, mental, all of them, and ensure that I get to be the best version of myself? So those are kind of like my 3 go-to points about how do we address it. And the last one is kind of just integrating this into your daily lives. So a lot of times our motivation is not always where it used to be. So we have to create routines that help us to manage our own stresses, to manage some of the issues that we're having. And a lot of times we feel like, okay, I could do all of this on my own. I can read something, or I can go to a webinar, or I could go to church and attend all of these support groups. But one of the things that we have to recognize is sometimes we need professional help. We need someone who can help us understand what we're going through and use their skills to help us navigate that and manage as we go forward. I love therapy. I feel like everybody should have some therapy. It's just the way to go. But I want you to consider all of those things and just see how we can use that now to improve not just one generation, but all of the generations that come after millennials.
Thank you. Those are some awesome points. Awesome points. Lastly, clear mind, save lives. What does that mean to you?
Okay, so first of all, let's talk about how Clear Minds Save Lives came about. So I was writing in my notebook one day, just thinking about, well, what's going on? And I was like, I just need to clear my mind. And that day, my tolerance for everything was just a little bit lower and everything was just getting on my last nerve. And I was like, you know what? Let me clear my mind to save my own life right now. Because when our stress levels are more than we can manage, we often don't think clearly. We put ourselves in positions where if we had thought about it, we probably would not have reacted or responded that way. So Clear Minds Save Lives just came up as one of those things I say to myself over and over to help me manage some of the difficult challenges. And I recognize that from a therapist perspective is one of those mantras to help clients do the same thing. Recognize that if we clear our minds of some of the clutter, and clutter could be anything from stress or thinking about family issues or thinking about all the things that we have to do, all the job requirements, all of those things, and then say, okay, I just need to clear my mind and figure out what I need to prioritize in order to move myself forward. Have you ever seen someone so stressed out that they look frazzled? And you're like, oh, girl, you need to get some help. You need to see somebody. You need to talk about it. And that's kind of how that all came about. So when you get to that point where you recognize that I can't manage this all on my own, I need some help, I need someone to help guide me, I need to move myself forward, then that's when you start saying, you know what, I need some help, and where do I get help?
Awesome. Awesome. And do you have any other comments that you would like to add before we close?
Okay, first of all, my stress level was on 10, but now that I've made the points that I wanted to make, I feel a little bit more relieved. I just want people to know that we have to do more to have conversations about mental health. We now have to change the discussions that we have around it, and we have to encourage other people to seek help. A lot has gone on in the last 2 years in this country. And because of it, there has been more access to services. There have also been a lot more people who recognize that they cannot deal with the trauma on their own and they need someone to help them. So I'm encouraging everybody to seek help. It may not be that you're going to go to a therapist every single week, but just going for that initial session to help you figure out where do I need to go from here. Engage in some self-care. And I know self-care has been one of those buzzwords since the pandemic started, but it really is about understanding your needs and figuring out what do you need to do regularly as part of your routine to keep your mental health together. One of the things I did in the last year was just walk in nature. Like sometimes I walk to the end of the block, turn around and go back, come back again, just to clear my mind of all the things that I was burdened with or I had going on. And so some other tips are really just engaging and understanding yourself and taking time for you, spending time just figuring out, well, what am I dealing with? What am I going through? And what do I need to manage? We have a lot of internal resources, but a lot of times we don't know how to access them. And that's how professionals come to help us. What are some of the resources that you have to tap into and how can we engage them in the healthiest way? So those are just my final thoughts. Your mental health matters. My mental health matters. It all matters. And we have to each do our part in helping our brothers and sisters and ourselves.
Amen. Thank you for listening to our talk. I would like to thank my guest, Jaditra Ingram. And I would also like to thank the viewers for listening in. Like our page for future notifications of upcoming sessions and comment under our videos. Let us know your thoughts and let us know what you would want us to talk about. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, Can We Talk? Thank you and good evening.